The last time I saw Adia, she was walking away from the village, her back straight, but her shoulders shaking. She did not look back. She could not. If she had, maybe she would have run back. Maybe she would have stayed, but she did not look back. I was a boy then, not yet a man, but old enough to know that something had broken that day, something that would never be made whole again. Adia and Olum had loved each other since they were children. It was the kind of love that made people smile. When Olum played the drums in the evening, Adia would always be the first to dance. And when she danced, the whole village would clap and laugh because Adia danced like the wind, free and full of life. Everyone knew they would marry one day. Even the elders said nothing against it. Olum's family was not as rich as Adia's, but he was a strong young man, a good hunter, and his aunts made the drums sing. That was enough. Or so we all thought. But when Adia became a woman, her father changed. He no longer smiled when he saw Olum. He no longer clapped when Adia danced to Olum's drums. He began to talk about a man from another village, a man with many cows and a house made of stone, a man who had already sent word that he wanted Adia as his wife. Adia cried. She begged her father. She begged her mother. She even begged the elders, but in our village, a father's word was final. Olum tried to fight for her. He went to her father, offering everything he had, his hunting weapons, his best drums, even his strongest goats. But it was not enough. On the day Adia left, the village was silent. Even the birds did not sing. She walked past Olum without a word. He did not try to stop her. He just stood there, his fists clenched, his eyes dark and empty. That night, for the first time in my life, I did not hear his drums. Olum never played again, and Adia never returned. Some say she lived well in her new home. Others say she cried every night. But what I know is this: our village was never the same, because love had come to us, danced in our firelight, and then left, never to return. The days after Adia left felt strange, like the air itself was heavier. People went about their lives, but something was missing. Olum stopped sitting with the young men in the evening. He stopped hunting. And worst of all, he stopped playing the drums. Before, his music filled the village every night. It called people out of their homes, made children laugh and elders nod their heads. But now, the silence sat in its place like an unwelcome guest. One evening, I went to see him. He was sitting outside his mother's hut, staring at his drums. They were still there, but covered in dust. I had never seen dust on Olum's drums before. "Why don't you play?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that frightened me. Emptiness. "For who?" he asked. Then he stood and walked into the darkness. That night, I realized something. Olum had not only lost Adia, he had lost himself. Months passed, then a year. People spoke of Adia less and less. Life moved on. The elders chose a new drummer. He was good, but his music was only sound. It had no soul. It had no life. It had no Adia. One day, word came that Adia had given birth to a son in her husband's village. The women whispered about it, wondering if she was happy. The men shook their heads, saying she had done what was best for her family. But Olum said nothing. He simply gathered his things and left the village. No one stopped him. No one asked where he was going. Some say he went to live in the forest, away from people. Others say he traveled far to a place where no one knew his name, where he could forget. But I knew the truth. Olum was searching, not for Adia because she was gone, but for a way to live without her. He never returned, and his drums never beat again. Years passed. The village changed. Children grew up, old ones left us, and new faces were born into our world. But some things remained the same. Olum's absence and the silence where his music used to be. I became a man. I took a wife. I had children of my own. And yet, on some nights, when the moon was high and the wind was quiet, I still thought of him, of Adia, of the love that had burned so brightly, only to be smothered by the hands of men who never carried its fire. Then, one day, a traveler came to the village. His face was lined with years, his body lean but strong. He carried nothing but a walking stick, a small bag, and a drum. At first, no one recognized him. His hair had grown longer, and his shoulders carried a weight that was not there before. But then he looked at me, and I knew. Olum, I whispered. The elders gathered. The people murmured. A lost son had returned, but Olum did not greet them. He did not bow. He did not speak. Instead, he sat by the fire, placed the drum before him,